What if I told you that one of the largest potential land deals in modern history wasn't about land at all? Not about ice, not about flags, not even about nationalism. What if it was actually about money, minerals, military power, and America's economic survival? In 2019, headlines laughed it off. Trump wants to buy Greenland memes flooded the internet. Late night shows turned it into comedy. Politicians dismissed it as a joke. But behind the jokes was a number that barely made headlines. $700 billion. That's more than the GDP of many countries. More than America spends on education in years. More than the annual budgets of dozens of nations combined. So the real question is not, did Trump want Greenland? The real question is, why would the United States even consider spending $700 billion on a frozen island? Because buried beneath the ice lies something far more dangerous than snow: power, resources, and control over the future global economy. Tonight, we're going to uncover the real story behind Trump's Greenland proposal. Not the meme version, but the strategic, economic, and geopolitical reality that most people never heard. And by the end of this video, you may realize something uncomfortable. This wasn't crazy. It was calculated. And the consequences could still reshape the American economy. Let's rewind. Greenland is the world's largest island. It's technically part of the Kingdom of Denmark, but it operates with significant autonomy. Population, barely 56,000 people. But here's what most people don't realize. Greenland is sitting on one of the richest untapped resource vaults on Earth. Under its ice and soil are massive reserves of rare earth minerals, uranium, zinc, gold, oil and natural gas, and strategic metals essential for electric vehicles, military hardware, satellites, and renewable energy. These aren't luxury resources. They are economic weapons. Right now, China dominates the rare earths supply chain. Over 60% of global production flows through Beijing, and that gives China leverage over everything from smartphones to missile guidance systems. America knows this, the Pentagon knows this, Wall Street knows this, and Trump, a businessman before becoming president, definitely knew this. But resources weren't the only reason Greenland suddenly became valuable. Climate change was rewriting the map. Melting Arctic ice began opening new shipping routes, cutting travel time between Asia, Europe, and North America by weeks. Whoever controls the Arctic controls trade routes, naval access, military positioning, energy corridors. Suddenly, Greenland wasn't remote, it was central. And that's when the idea moved from fantasy to strategy. Contrary to popular belief, Trump did not invent the idea of buying Greenland. The United States tried this before. In 1867, the same year America bought Alaska, Secretary of State William Seward explored purchasing Greenland and Iceland or Hawaii for the same reasons: military advantage, trade dominance, resource control. In 1946, after World War II, the US offered Denmark $100 million in gold for Greenland. Denmark refused, but the US never left. America built Thule Air Base in northern Greenland, still one of the most important missile defense and surveillance installations in the world. So when Trump revived the idea in 2019, it wasn't random. It was a continuation of a 150-year strategic obsession. Only this time, the stakes were much higher. By 2018, the global order was shifting. China was expanding influence through the Belt and Road Initiative. Russia was militarizing the Arctic. Rare earth supply chains were tightening, and America's economic dominance was facing pressure. Trump entered office with one clear obsession: trade wars, supply chains, economic independence. He pushed tariffs, he targeted China, he demanded NATO countries pay more. Then behind closed doors, his administration started looking at ways to reduce America's dependence on foreign resources. Greenland became attractive not just as territory but as a strategic hedge. Reports later revealed that Trump personally asked advisors to explore the financial feasibility of acquiring Greenland. Not jokingly, not casually, seriously. Internal discussions began estimating costs, infrastructure investment, political negotiations, military expansion, and long-term development. That's where the $700 billion figure emerged. Not as a purchase price alone, but as the total long-term investment required to integrate Greenland into US economic and security systems. In Trump's business mindset, it looked like a massive, upfront cost for long-term dominance. To him, Greenland wasn't an expense. It was an asset. Then the story leaked. August 2019, media extradited Trump, confirmed it publicly. Denmark's prime minister called the idea absurd. Trump cancelled a planned state visit to Denmark in response. Diplomatic tension rose. The deal was dead, publicly. But something important happened. For the first time, Americans began asking, why Greenland? And quietly, behind the scenes, the Pentagon and economic planners kept working on Arctic strategy anyway, because even if Greenland couldn't be bought, it still had to be controlled. Here's what most people missed. The Greenland plan wasn't about real estate. It was about preventing an economic disaster. Because America is facing a hidden vulnerability. Dependence on foreign-controlled resources and shipping routes. If the US loses access to critical minerals, if China tightens supply chains, if Arctic routes fall under hostile control, the American economy doesn't just slow down, it breaks. Manufacturing halts. Defense production collapses. Technology prices skyrocket. And inflation explodes, which raises a terrifying possibility. What if Trump's Greenland move wasn't reckless? What if it was an attempt to buy insurance against economic collapse? And what happens if America never secures that insurance? When Trump's Greenland proposal collapsed publicly, the world moved on. News cycles shifted. Social media forgot. Memes faded. But geopolitics did not pause. Behind closed doors, something far more important happened. America quietly accelerated its Arctic strategy. The Pentagon increased Arctic patrols. Military exercises in cold weather environments expanded. Satellite coverage over polar regions intensified. Diplomatic outreach to Greenland's autonomous government increased. Why? Because the underlying problem never disappeared. Greenland was still sitting on trillions of dollars worth of untapped resources. China was still hunting for rare earth dominance. Russia was still militarizing the Arctic coastline. And global supply chains were becoming more fragile by the year. Then came 2020. The pandemic shattered international trade. Shipping bottlenecks exposed just how vulnerable the global economy really was. Factories shut down not because demand disappeared, but because a single missing component could freeze entire production lines. Suddenly, Trump's obsession with supply chain control no longer looked paranoid. It looked prophetic. Let's talk numbers. Rare earth minerals are essential for electric vehicle batteries, smartphones and semiconductors, wind turbines, military radar systems, jet engines, satellite technology. Without them, modern civilization stalls. Right now, the US imports most of these materials. China controls a massive portion of refining capacity. That creates a dangerous imbalance. If geopolitical tensions escalate, tariffs, sanctions, conflict, access can be restricted overnight. This is not theoretical. China has already used rare earth export restrictions as leverage in past trade disputes. Now imagine this scenario. The US loses access to critical materials. Manufacturing slows. Technology production drops. Defense contractors face shortages. Prices surge. Inflation as jobs disappear. Markets panic. That's not just an inconvenience. That's systemic economic shock. Greenland offered something unique. A politically stable, Western-aligned source of critical minerals outside China's influence. Owning Greenland would have meant controlling supply rather than begging for access. From an economic standpoint, it would be equivalent to securing the oil fields of the future. History shows us this pattern again and again. Empires rise by controlling trade routes and resources. They fall when they lose them. Britain dominated the seas until competitors matched its naval power. The United States dominated oil supply chains until global energy competition intensified. Now, the next battlefield is data mineral semiconductor supply. Arctic shipping routes, and Greenland sits at the center of all four. In 2023 and 2024, multiple Western governments began investing heavily in Arctic infrastructure. Because the ice is melting faster than expected, new shipping lanes are opening. Routes that once took weeks longer through the Suez Canal can now bypass choke points entirely. Whoever controls Arctic access controls trillions of dollars in future trade. Trump didn't create this reality. He just said the quiet part out loud. After Trump left office, the US shifted tone. No more talk of buying Greenland instead. Strategic partnerships, investment agreements, mining, exploration deals, diplomatic cooperation. But here's the problem. None of these offer guaranteed control. They rely on political stability, foreign governance, and long-term cooperation. Ownership gives certainty, partnerships give risk, and risk is exactly what markets hate. That's why America is still vulnerable. Because while politicians debate diplomacy, China and Russia are building infrastructure, ports, icebreaker fleets, and Arctic military bases. They aren't waiting, they're preparing. Here's a statistic that should worry you. Over 80% of rare earth processing currently happens in China. That means even when minerals are mined elsewhere, they often go back to China for refining. This gives Beijing leverage over global pricing, availability, and production speed. Now connect this to inflation. During supply chain disruptions, prices skyrocketed not because people bought more, but because goods became harder to make. Scarcity drives inflation. Control scarcity, and you control economic pressure. Greenland represented an opportunity to break that dependence. Failing to secure it means America remains exposed. Here's the uncomfortable math. The US economy loses trillions during major supply chain disruptions. The pandemic-era supply chaos alone caused massive inflation spikes, trillions in emergency stimulus, market instability, consumer price shocks. Now compare that to $700 billion. Suddenly, it doesn't look insane. It looks like insurance. Expensive insurance. But insurance against economic catastrophe. Trump viewed Greenland like a business acquisition. High upfront cost, long-term strategic payoff, reduced dependency, increased leverage, and control over future resources. Whether you agree with him politically or not, from a pure economic power perspective, the logic was disturbingly rational. 3 key takeaways. Let's break this down into 3 clear lessons. This wasn't about nationalism. It was about controlling future supply chains, military positioning, and economic leverage. Land was just the vehicle. Resources were the destination. Despite new policies, America remains dependent on foreign-controlled resources. Until domestic or allied supply chains fully replace Chinese dominance, economic shocks remain possible. The problem wasn't solved, it was postponed. The next economic battleground isn't the Middle East, it's not Europe, it's the Arctic. Trade routes, minerals, military access. Whoever dominates this region will influence the next century of global economics. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people don't want to hear. The global economy is moving toward resource competition, not cooperation. Countries aren't preparing for peace. They're preparing for leverage. Trump's Greenland idea wasn't isolated. It was an early signal of a world shifting from diplomacy to economic power struggles. And the question isn't whether another leader will try something similar. The question is, who will act first next time? And will they succeed? Imagine waking up one day to headlines that say, global rare earth shortage hits US manufacturing, or Arctic trade routes controlled by rival powers. At that moment, people will ask, why didn't we prepare? Why didn't we secure resources earlier? Why didn't we see this coming? The warning signs are already here. We just don't call them headlines yet. If this video changed how you see geopolitics, economics, and global power, hit the like button so this message reaches more people. Subscribe if you want deep, truth-driven breakdowns that mainstream media avoids, and comment below. Do you think the US should have pursued Greenland, or was Trump's plan too risky? Your answer might say more about the future than you realize, because the next economic war won't be fought with tanks. It will be fought with resources, routes, and control.